The OnePlus 12 beat the Pixel 8 Pro in my last comparison, so how do the step-down models fare? Find out in this Google Pixel 8 versus OnePlus 12R head-to-head. I'd first like to address the elephant in the room. In the US, the Pixel 8 MSRP is $200 higher than the OnePlus 12R. And in the UK, the price difference is only £50, which muddles things a bit when it comes to value for money. TLDR, the 12R is far better value in the US than it is the UK, and today we will be looking at things from a US perspective. Also, this is the Genshin Impact model of the OnePlus 12R, and it looks absolutely stunning but is incredibly limited. It only affects the colour and the external graphics, the colours of the chargers, stuff like that. Functionally though, it is exactly the same as the normal OnePlus 12R, so anything I say here will be applicable to the model that you can order online. Because yes, you can only buy the 12R online, you can't buy it in carrier stores in the US, where the Pixel 8 you actually can go and pick it up in store, so that is going to skew some people's buying decisions. Okay, with that out of the way, these two phones are quite vastly different. One is a compact device focusing on camera performance, build quality, and software features, and the other is a larger phone with a bigger battery and a display that places importance on performance and longevity. They're made for two different customers, but one will come out on top by the end of this video. Don't worry about that. I have to confess, I love the way Google built its Pixel 8. It's easy to use one-handed, it takes up hardly any room in your pocket, it feels very polished, it feels very premium. I have confidence that it's not going to die out in British weather thanks to the IP68 rating, and the Pixel 8 feels dense and high-end. By comparison, the 12R's larger size makes it feel, I don't know, a little less premium, though that could also be the frosting on the back of the handset. But you only get IP64 weatherproofing, so it's unlikely to survive a dunk in the pool the same way the Pixel 8 would. That said, you are treated to an alert slider, which I always appreciate when I use a OnePlus phone, and though I might not like the curved edges of the display, it does aid in a better grip and a more futuristic look in my opinion. Speaking of the screens, this one's a little more cut and dry. The 12R sports a higher resolution LTPO 120Hz panel, meaning that it can dip right the way down to about 1 Hz and go all the way up to 120 to conserve battery life, where the smaller 120Hz panel in the Pixel 8 can't do that. Both screens are mega bright, though the 12R's once again takes the win, getting slightly brighter in HDR, and the Pixel 8's panel is absolutely brilliant, don't get me wrong. I do prefer its colour profile, as it's punchier and more contrast heavy, and the saturation is just more present out of the box. But if you watch a lot of content or play a lot of games and you're going to want the big display, the 12R screen is every day of the week the better option. Now, not only do the curved sides introduce some glare, but it's also resulted in some phantom touches in my time with the 12R and indeed the full fat 12. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I do like that we're seeing flat panels on the more modern smartphones, and the Pixel 8 does kind of get a brownie point for me in that regard. OnePlus won't be celebrating a victory in this section because when it comes down to the software, it's kind of hard to argue with Google's Pixel experience. It's just plain better. Both models run Android 14, but its 7 years of software updates support beats out the OnePlus's 4. The UI feels more polished and handmade for that specific device and not an Oppo skin. And yeah, that's before we even get into the AI modes, where Google's Pixel 8 has plenty of those at its disposal and OnePlus doesn't have any at the moment. AI Magic Editor allows you to move and remove objects in images. Top Shot lets you pick the right frame, and Audio Eraser uses AI to cut out background sound to your liking. The OnePlus 12R has none of that, so it really is hardware versus software when it comes to these particular smartphones. And wow, has OnePlus actually gone all in on hardware? From the cameras to the performance specs to the battery, where do I even start? Okay, let's start with performance, because the 12R, even with the year-old Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 SoC and 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, smokes the Pixel 8's Tensor G3 and 8 gigs of RAM. Now, that isn't to say that the Pixel 8's performance is bad, it's definitely not. Day to day, it's really responsive, but when you want to push beyond that and start gaming, heavily multitasking, the 12R really does come into its own, and it's going to stay quicker for longer. It is a joy to game on, which is probably no surprise given there is a special limited edition gaming themed model. It's definitely a step down from the full Fat 12 in terms of performance, but it's definitely not a night and day difference. And I think when it comes to price to performance, the 12R might be one of the best phones on the market right now. And the same can absolutely be said for battery life, where the Pixel 8 is pretty good. It's an all-day phone for me personally, but the 12R is just a level above, giving me 2 days most days. Its 5500 mAh battery compared to the slightly less than 1000 mAh less in the 8 is definitely a big factor here. But there's also a 100 watt brick in the box compared to no brick in the box with the Pixel and a 27 watt limit. For context, at full speed, the OnePlus charges to 100% in less time than the Pixel 8 takes to get to 50%, so that's kind of nuts. And now we get to the part of the video where, with the full fat versions of these phones, we saw a big upset. I'll chuck the camera specs up on screen for you right now. You can see the 12R is definitely hamstrung in the camera department compared to the main OnePlus 12, as is the Pixel 8 to the 8 Pro actually. So if you really want to get the best cameras, you're gonna have to go for the bigger models of these phones. Sure, the 12R has a macro camera, but that's as good as useless in my opinion, so I'm just gonna ignore it. Focusing on the main for a second, there were a few things I picked up on. Firstly, the Pixel does a better job of giving you a more natural image, whether that be the skin tones, portrait mode cutouts, exposure, contrast, HDR. The OnePlus is a capable phone with a good sensor, but it doesn't have that processing prowess that the Pixel possesses. I found in most scenarios that, surprise surprise, I preferred the image of the Pixel. And I think that might come down to the fact that the 12R lacks the Hasselblad partnership that really helps the full Fat 12 when it comes to color science. When using the ultra-wide, there's a bit more of a disparity. Not only is the Pixel's lens wider, so able to capture more field of view, it has a bigger sensor underneath and has bigger photo sites. So in every scenario, but specifically in low light, it is more capable and has a more powerful setup, if you really want to fit more in that frame. Funnily enough, in selfies, I actually preferred the OnePlus 12R. It exposes more naturally and there's some quite pleasing sharpness that gives you the illusion of higher resolution. And in video, actually, it swings back right the other way because the Pixel 8's stabilization is so much smoother than the 12R's that it can actually look quite jarring on the latter. Though both are capable of the same quality video on paper, this shows it really isn't all about the specs. Overall, this one wasn't hard to call in my opinion. In the US, the OnePlus 12R is the new king of the mid-range smartphones. It handily bests the Pixel 8 in performance, battery life, display, and really hangs with it in the camera performance as well. Sure, the software support isn't as good and the lack of AI tools might be enough to turn some people off, but these are a small price to pay for an otherwise fantastic smartphone. The Pixel 8 is still a tremendous device in my opinion, but the OnePlus 12R just slaps it in value and so many other factors. So it's my winner for today's shootout. Oh, especially this Genshin Impact edition. It is very pretty indeed. Let me know how you feel about this matchup in the comments. I'd really appreciate a like and comment on this video if you're feeling it, and a subscription if you're feeling particularly generous. I've been Ryan Thomas with Android Police, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.